Okay, hope everyone's well. I've tried this video a few times now and I always end up with camera issues. Either it turns off midway through or it seems to just get bored of me halfway through. So I'm going to give it one more shot. It's a video I just wanted to quickly do, as quickly as I can really, on planning an adventure. Obviously this is a huge topic and you could write long books about planning an adventure, and it would have many topics on bike choice and kit choice and everything else. And I guess I just wanted to do a quick synopsis which is relevant to me. I mean, I've now planned quite a lot of trips. I've gone through different approaches to planning the trips. I've done a lot of trips. And I find from speaking to other people, people who've either travelled or not travelled, that the planning stage sometimes trips people up. It's a stage that they just can't seem to get through get through to the other side to make that trip happen. You know, maybe they've got everything they need to make it happen, but the planning just seems to stall, and then that trip never happens. And this applies equally to a 2-day trip around the Peak District as it does to a 2-year trip around the world. I don't think there's any big difference really. I think the planning process and the factors are exactly the same, whether it's your first trip away for a weekend camping or your first trip across America or around the world. It's identical. And I think first and foremost, we've got to define what is an adventure travel or an adventure. And to me, an adventure is something that takes you out your current comfort zone, that gives you a bit of a challenge, that makes you nervous, that makes you feel a little bit excited or apprehensive. And equally, again, that can apply to people going away for their first time on a loaded up motorcycle for a camping trip for around England or a weekend. In the same way that you feel anxious about setting off around the world. So I don't think we're not trying to define adventure because that's impossible. But the headings that I put together, and this is just brainstorming with myself on an old bit of card. Restrictions. I think it's important when planning a trip. You've got to be very conscious of what your restrictions are, and it's easy to overlook them, but they are what they are. We've all got restrictions governing us in terms of time, money, inclination, visas, miscellaneous, that sort of thing. But time and money are the big ones. Yes, you might want to go around the world, or you might want to go Land's End Johnny Groats, but you haven't got enough time to do it in the way you want to do it, and therefore you have to compromise. You have to think about how you can get something out of the time that you've got. And I think the saddest thing is when people, they've set their sights so much on doing something big, something massive, that they lose sight of what they could be doing in the meantime. And they might lament that they have children, and they might have elderly grandparents or jobs to keep down, and they might lament that and sort of put all their energy into a trip that might never happen. With reality, if you reassess the situation, you could do something really exciting and adventurous in a 2-week period or a week period or that weekend period. And so I think restrictions, they play a part in everyone's lives. And you've got to be realistic to what they allow you to do and not do. And it's great to be ambitious, but I think you've also got to be realistic. Money, if you've only got £2,000, you're not going to go around the world. If you've only got 2 weeks, then you're not going to go out to Russia and back, unless you want to race there and race back and maybe not see anything along the way. So it's about learning how to, or thinking how to, use your time wisely and your money wisely to get the most out of your adventure. Without, to me the saddest thing is when you try and squeeze too much into a short period of time, and what do you get out of it? No, not a lot. You've just raced somewhere to race back, and also you're gonna be conscious of your skill level and where you're at. If you're nervous to ride into Europe, then maybe it's not now the time to be riding across America. Start small, build big, and I think that's how we all start. When I was 17, 18, I'd think a 40-mile-a-day ride was a big ride. Now, obviously, you just get on a bike, you do 400 miles in a day without even thinking about it. So you've got to build up. But none of us get to that place overnight. We've all got to build up. My Sydney to London trip back from Australia, that did sort of happen overnight, and that was really in at the deep end. But I'm not sure that's an approach that would suit everyone for certain. Next one, objections. Obviously, objections is probably the biggest thing I think that stop trips happening. A lot of the time they're external factors, friends, relatives, online. They all throw objections to come up with objections to why you shouldn't do what you want to do. You know, you've set your mind on something, you've maybe plotted a route, you've chosen your bike, you've got everything together, but then, you know, your parents or your friends or your colleagues or somebody online who you never met says, oh no, but that's not a good idea, maybe you should do this and maybe you should do that. And I think that sows seeds of doubt, which means that people start questioning their choices, and then that choice, that the decision they made becomes eroded to the point you think, oh, this is actually a bad idea. And I think that's why sometimes it's best not to tell anyone what you're going to do or what your plan is, because then you've got a purity of, you've created this idea, you've defined it, you've researched it maybe, you've looked at what's feasible within terms of your restrictions, you know it's doable, and therefore you just got to do it. I think the problem I observe is that so many people, they're desperate for information and to listen and to read and to hear and to gather all this information together, and ultimately it just can lead to confusion. And I think also objections are often internal. You start questioning your ability and whether you can do this or should be doing this and things like that. And I think it's just, you've got to be very aware that most objections aren't really real. They're just sort of imaginary objections that you've allowed to ferment in your mind, and you just got to get on and do it. Because if you listen to your inner voice or to people on the internet forever, you'd never do anything. And so it's just having that focus, and even if that means isolating yourself a little bit, it's having that focus to make that trip happen, because you've envisaged it happen, and therefore it's no reason why it shouldn't happen. You just got to stop those voices. When I did Sydney to London, when I was originally going to ride from London to Australia, and I probably wasn't the right time, but I asked a lot of people what they thought, and they all thought it was a stupid idea, and therefore so did I, and I never ended up doing it in that direction. When I came to ride back from Australia, I told no one, apart from the person in Australia who I knew would push me to do it. But I told no one, and I told people once I'd hit the road, because by then it was too late. Whatever they said about time, money, whatever restrictions they might have tried to impose on me, it was too late. I'd gone. And therefore I think sometimes trying to get too much information is a bad thing. Bike choice, we all agonise over bike choice, and the Facebook chats labour themselves to death. Oh, I'm thinking of getting Africa Twin. What does everyone else think? Oh no, you should get a KTM. No, you should get a BMW. It goes on and on and on and on. And I think by now it's been quite apparent by so many different people that you can do any trip on any bike pretty much. Obviously if you want to do the Trans-America Trail or the Trans-European Trail, you're going to want something dirt focused, ideally. But within reason, you can take a super bike around the world, you can take a Triumph Rocket around the world, you can take a Postie bike around the world, you can take a GS 1200 around the world, any trip's possible. So, what's the ideal bike for your adventure? Probably the bike you've already got, and that's probably the sensiblest thing to say. Also the cheapest. When I hear of people buying new bikes for their trips, you think, God, why don't you just take what you've got? Obviously, each bike's different, every bike's got a compromise, no bike is perfect, some will be lacking range or comfort, or maybe some are too heavy, some service intervals aren't quite right, fuel range, but these are all issues to be solved and thought and worked around, and if you have to change your route a little bit, say the Himalayan, it's not a great motorway bike, okay, I'm going to avoid the motorway. It's sort of adapting the trip to fit you, the bike that you've got and that you like riding. And it's as simple as that. You want to ride a super bike around the world, okay, you're probably not going to find the jungle tracks. You might stick to more tarmac. Although I know Bruce Smart and Jacques Lucas, and they send pictures back of their R1s stuck in all sorts of mud and slop. So bike, don't stress it. Obviously bike prep, bike spares, tools, what do you need? Don't stress it, because you can't plan for every eventuality of what might go wrong with a bike. You take your cables, take inner tubes, puncture repair, plug, air filter, tie wraps, tape, basic stuff like that. Take what you know how to use, and if you're taking tie levers, know how to use tie levers. Make sure you've got the right axle bolts for your bike. Make sure that you're not working on the assumption that your standard issue toolkit with the bike is comprehensive, because generally they don't include anything. Maybe a wrench for the suspension setting, and that's about it. So think about what you're going to take. Don't take too much. There's no point. And if you're a long way from home, breakdown cover's great, and if you're even further away from home, then your own intuition and problem solving will kick in, and you will find a way through. So planning, tight and loose. Do you overplan things, or do you let things go by the wayside and see what happens? It depends what kind of personality you are. I'm more of a loose kind of planner. I don't like to define things, and I think that allows a trip to develop at its own natural pace and change and adapt to what's happening around. You might get bad weather, you might get a puncture, you might meet somebody you like, you might find a nice accommodation plot and you want to stay another night. If you've tightly planned it, you can't make any change. You've got to stick to what you plan, and that plan might have seemed good pre-trip when you planned it, but when you get there, it might be rubbish. So I like to keep it loose, but that comes down to blueprint versus research. Now, to me, instead of trying to pinpoint every night's accommodation and narrow my route down to a GPS route, when I think people set out, they plot a GPS route at home and then follow it around countries that they've never been to before, and don't rely on anything to do with their own intuition or asking people what they think on the ground. They just follow a map that they drew back in England when they were sat at the computer. It's madness, really, isn't it? I think research is most crucial. Do your research. Know where the good roads are. Know where the good accommodation is. The campsites, the places to see. Don't do that where you ride past something, and then in the next town they say, Did you see such and such, that big cathedral or something? And you say no. I think that's where you could do your research. Guidebooks online. If you're planning a trip to Ireland, what are the best things to see on the wide Atlantic way? Google. Best roads in Ireland, Google. Right, okay? Get a paper map, and that's why a paper map to me is essential, because you can see where everything is and where it fits into a location, and then you can start plotting a route that takes into the things that you've identified you want to see. That route's loose, and by looking at it on paper, you've seen the alternatives. You know where you can cut a corner if you're running a bit low on time that day. You've had a puncture, you need to save 3 hours. Okay, I can straight line it there rather than taking a weekly route. And I think that's when research plays far bigger a part than blueprinting. Ireland, I saw somebody put a post up, has anybody got a GPX route for going around Ireland? And you think, so you're cutting out all the research stage where you're going to actually learn something and learn about where you're going to be riding, what's good, what's bad, what to avoid, what to see. Instead, you're just going to be following somebody's GPX route. And if things go wrong on that GPX route, you're going to have no wisdom or research to adapt and adjust. So there's no right and wrong. I'm not saying you've got to do it like I do it how you do it. But there's two ways of approaching it. And obviously that plays into accommodation routes, sites, alternative options. Finally, solo or group, what's best for you. I think there's a real merit in group travel. You have the camaraderie, and if something goes wrong, you can all have a good time while you fix punctures. And it's nice to share something. I think there's a big difference between doing it with a group of friends and doing it with your partner. Obviously, there's that intimacy of sharing a nice sunset somewhere with a partner versus with a gaggle of friends. So I think doing it with a partner is very different to doing it with a friend. Doing it with friends. And then there's solo, which is very different. Obviously, you become very assured, maybe, self-dependent. Everything falls on your shoulders, but it allows you to make decisions when you want to and how you want to. If you want to stop for lunch and have a bit longer for lunch, you haven't got to say, do you want to stop for lunch a bit longer? Or are you tired yet? Or shall we ride a bit further yet? Or can I stop for a photo? You don't have any of that. And I think when I hear people, they've been planning a trip for ages with friends, and then their friends drop out one by one, it's left down to one. If that one person goes off and does that trip on their own, they generally come back and go, wow, I'm glad I did it on my own. So don't be nervous, be nervous about doing it on your own, but don't let that put you off doing it on your own. Because by being on your own, you meet so many more people, you have to engage, you chat, I think you get a lot further into a trip by being solo. And it makes you decisive. It stops you being that, I'll stand back and let somebody else make a decision. It really engages you, because you've got to be. But again, no right or wrong. Making it happen, to me, you've got to book something. If you're uncertain and you have second thoughts, you've got to put something in place. When I did Land's End to Johnny Groats on the Postie bike, I'd not ridden that bike for a good few years, and I thought, I'm going to do Land's End to Johnny Groats. Kept putting it off. A year went by, nearly 18 months went by, and I went, no, it's got to happen. And what I did, I said, anybody who wants to do this, meet me down at Land's End. on this date at this time and we'll do Land's End to John O'Groats. Once I put that in place and I knew people were going to be there, that was it. That put it in place for me. Other people might be good to book an accommodation stop. So even if you're going away for the weekend, to the Peak District, book an accommodation in the Peak District. And that means that morning, whether it's rain or sleet or you wake up and you don't feel like you want to, you've got to get to that accommodation because you booked and paid for it. Equally with a ferry or a flight, do whatever it takes to trick your mind into making that happen. Because we all get these fear nerves down. We all get it. Even now after all the travelling I've done, sometimes I can set off and think, oh, not sure about this, or I wake up in the morning and think, oh, I don't really want to go. I don't want. Should I be? Is this the right route, or is this the right trip? I've got money to make somewhere else, or you always get fear nerves and doubt. But if something's booked in place, it's done. It's happening. There was a guy contacted me. He was nervous about getting on a ferry to France to do his first European trip. I think he booked his ferry, but got there and then turned back. Now, booking accommodation in France, that's what I would approach it. Book my ferry and then the first night's accommodation in France, and then you think, okay, I'm getting on that ferry because I've got to get that accommodation, and just giving yourself that push and put it in your mind. And I think if you're planning a trip for a year down the line, say you want to go across America or Iceland, even if you've got no other plan in place, just book a flight, because once that flight's in place, then that's it. Everything rotates around that and comes together around that. You've got to make an initial strike of action, and then it becomes so much easier to plan. Trying to plan every detail without actually booking something in place is impossible, because you've got no real fixed boundary. Everything's moving all the time. Dates are moving, and plans are moving, routes are moving. But put that date in place. It's booked, right, and then everything flows into that. And it becomes very easy. And then equally on the road, you got to think, what do I want to get out of this? Don't expect necessarily to enjoy every moment of it. There's a lot of times when you're riding along, especially on a prolonged trip, you think, I'm bored now, or I want to go home now. This is not what I thought it was going to be. I heard of a few guys who shipped their bikes down to South America to do Pan America. One got a week into the trip, turned around and went home. I don't know if he was unrealistic about what it was going to be like or didn't give it enough time, but just be aware that you might get there and set off and think, oh, I can't do this. And that's probably why I ended up doing from Sydney to London to home, because psychologically I had to go home one way or another, and I may as well do it on a bike. If I was to ride from here to Australia, I'd probably get a week in and think, oh, I'm not enjoying this. Why am I riding to Australia? I'd rather be at home. And I think that's why sometimes equally you've got to trick yourself. Just got to get out there, do it, and let it flow, sort of thing. So dealing with drama, you're going to have drama on the way. That's inevitable. Deal with it. Don't stress it. You've got a puncture. You don't know what you're going to do, or things go wrong. You don't know what you're going to do. Just have some faith in yourself that it'll come together, because it always generally does. A lull in the middle. I think you should be prepared. Certainly if you're going away for more than 2 weeks, to have that mid-trip lull where you seem, you've had the excitement to carry you out of your destination, out of your departure place, and you've not quite got into the bit where the excitement of getting to the end cuts in, and you're in the middle, and it can sometimes be a bit tricky. You kind of uncertain, and that certainly affected me on Sydney to London. I got to India and was just overwhelmed, I think, by still having so far away to go. So just be aware of it. Completion, don't expect to get to the end and feel triumphant and jubilant about what you've achieved. And I think the problem with some of these trips is you set them as such an elevated position of like, if I could do this, then wow, I'll have achieved my dream of doing this brilliant bike trip. And you expect the end to be rose tinted or rose lined, and then you get to the end and go, oh, is that it? Oh, now where? And everything you spent your life dreaming up to get to, that point you've dreamt to get into, it fades away, and then you're left like going, oh, well, what now? And I think that's what often gives way to the sort of gloominess that people find or experience at the end of their big trip, that actually nothing's really changed. I've been on a big trip, I've come home, so just be aware of that. And equally moving on, take what you've learned. Yeah, you might not have enjoyed it. You might never want to do a trip again, and that's great. And that's fine. There's nothing. You don't have to keep doing big trips. I think the worst thing about doing Sydney to London when I got to England, people are like, "Where next?" It's like, "My God, I've just ridden 23,000 miles on a 105cc bike. Have I not ridden far enough?" But whatever every question anyone asks was, where next? And sometimes you don't want to go anywhere. You just, you want to stay still. Equally, you might start to think, well, what next? And then you'll start this process again, and you'll refine it, and you'll work through it, and you'll improve it, and it'll get easier. If I was starting here before Sydney to London, I would have been terrified by all this. But now, after so many trips, it's like, well, where do I want to go next week? If I want to go around the world next week, as long as I could get my paperwork and I had no restrictions, then I could go. But that's only because I've been there and done it. So that's it. Planning an adventure. We overthink it, I think, is the conclusion. And we worry too much about where we should go and what we should do and what we should do it on and what we should wear. The main thing is doing it. And the main way of doing it is to book something in place, to make sure it happens, and to do it within your restrictions. And don't feel bad about your restrictions. I've heard people almost totally begrudge their wives and partners and kids and grandparents. It's almost like, if it wasn't for their wives and kids, that they would be riding around the world. I'd love to do what you did, but I've got wives and kids. And you think, no, you don't need to think like that. You need to think, I've got a wife and a kid. That means I've got a stable home life. I've got people to come back to. I'm allowed out for a week or 2 weeks or however long I can get away from home. What can I do in that period of time? And you can do so much in 2 weeks. You can do so much in a week. Land's End to John O'Groats, up around Scotland, over to Ireland. You can do all that in a week and have the best adventure I need. The great thing about motorcycle travel is that if you spend a week on a bike, to me, you've got as much reward as if you spent a year on a bike. And that's a lot more manageable and enjoyable. So that's it. Good luck on your trips. Any questions, give us a shout. Cheers. Bye.